Welcome to Parks, Recreation and Community Services Commission special meeting, Monday, March 20th. Roll call, please.
Commissioners Asatrian?
Present.
Fuad?
Here.
Michaels?
Present.
Wu?
Present.
President Kafayan?
Yes.
The agenda for the March 20th, 2017 regular meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall on or before Friday, March 17, 2017. Item 2, upcoming council agenda items.
Thank you. President Kalfai and members of the Commission, we have a few items coming up in April. On April 4th, we have a report in regards to our landscape contract maintenance. On April 11th, we have approval of the fiscal year 2017-2018 proposed CDBG annual action plan. Also on April 11th, we have 2 proclamations, one declaring April as Fair Housing Month and another proclamation, National Community Development Week.
Okay. Next item.
Item 3, Commission staff comments.
Any comments? Next.
President Kalfai and members of the Commission, last month we had promised to bring back some information in regards to calls for services from the police department at Palmer Park. So we talked to one of the sergeants, watch commander sergeants, a few days ago, and he provided us with some information in terms of calls for service. So in 2018, since the park has been open, there have been 14 calls for service. Calls for service can be traffic stops, safety checks, welfare checks, minor police calls in terms of ticketing and basically more traffic-related issues. There were 2 items, not to be of concern, but they handled it pretty well in terms of PD and fire enforcement, which was a park patron that was injured while at the skate park. In 2016, we didn't ask for those numbers because the facility was closed. And in 2015, there were 11 calls for service. So there's an increase of 3 calls for service at the same reporting period. Like I mentioned earlier, the calls for service can be a regular safety check, a walkthrough, traffic citation, and minor incidences in terms of police-related or fire-related calls. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer questions in terms of calls for service.
No.
One other item, too, in terms of Palmer Park, we are working with the Public Works Department to install 2 separate meters, one for the basketball court lights and one for the skate park lights. And staff will determine a time to turn off those lights. Right now we're tentatively thinking turning them off every night at 8 o'clock, depending on sunrise and sunset.
Yeah. Any questions?
Currently, what time is it being turned off?
10 o'clock.
Daily.
Daily.
And you're looking into perhaps turning it off at 8 p.m. starting when?
At 8, starting when we install the timers.
And then that's going to be for the duration of the year, or are we going to revisit that at a later time?
We will revisit it at a later time.
Okay.
Just to clarify, currently there's only 1 timer on the lights that turns all of the lights off at 10, and
yes.
you would be installing 2 additional timers for the basketball courts and the skate park to control those separately.
Yes.
Any more questions? Iris.
Yes, President Kafayan, members of the Commission, we have several events and activities taking place between now and our next meeting. I'd like to go through those now. Spring Day Camp started today at Pacific Community Center and Spar Heights Community Center, going through the end of this week. We have a Medicinal Plants of the West lecture and hike taking place on March 25th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. However, space is now full. We have a community meeting regarding the 2017-18 Annual Action Plan taking place at Pacific Community Center on March 23rd at 7 p.m. We have the Cesar Chavez 16th Annual Celebration at Pacific Community Center on March 25th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. From March 27th through March 29th, we have free pickleball lessons offered at Pacific Park in the outdoor courts from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. We have a tea night out at Pacific Community Center on March 31st from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. The One Glendale Basketball Championship Day is on April 1st, 2017 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Pacific Community Center. We're offering the Cavity Nesters Lecture and Hike at Dukmajian Wilderness Park on April 1st from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Herbs of the San Gabriel Mountains Lecture and Hike will be offered at Dukmajian Wilderness Park on April 8th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We have another tea night out at Pacific Community Center on April 14th from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Tax Day Wilderness Workday will be taking place at Dukmajian Wilderness Park on April 15th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Spring Extravaganza will be offered at Pacific Community Center on April 15th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. All community centers will be closed except for rentals on April 16th in observance of Easter. And just a reminder, the registration is now open for the Verdugo Mountains 10K Trail Run and Hike, which is taking place on May 7th at Brand Park. Registration can be done at www.runtheverdugos.com. And then we'll be back here for our next commission meeting on April 17th at 2:30 p.m. And for more information, the public can call 818-548-2000 or visit www.glendaleca.gov/residents/calendar. Thank you.
Any more activities to add on? Next item, please.
Next, we have item 4, oral communications. I don't have any cards. Item 5, consent items. At A, approval of the minutes of the Commission special meeting held on February 27, 2017.
Do we have any unfinished business from last minute? Anything to review? Okay, do I have a motion?
I make the motion to approve the minutes from February 27th meeting.
I'll second.
Commissioners Asatrian?
Yes.
Fuad?
Yes.
Michaels?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes.
President Kalfayan?
Yes.
Item 6, action items. At A, integrated pest management program.
Good afternoon, President Kalfayan, members of Commission. We are here today to ask you to adopt the Integrated Pest Management Program we put together for CSP's Park Services section. We do not intend to make you expert on pest management, yet this is going to be a very brief overview of what we've captured in the program. I'd like to acknowledge a couple of our staff that worked diligently in putting this program together. It seems only one of them is here with us today. Credit for this work goes to Dennis Gaudenti, who is a Park Services supervisor, and he is a licensed advisor for pesticide applications for many years. We also have with us Raul Alvarado, who is here in the audience. He is our current pesticide applicator, and he put numerous hours in putting this program together. And I, by no means, am an expert, but they've taught me enough to be able to present this material to you. And if we get to some serious technical questions, I will defer to the experts to answer. But for now, if you'll allow me, I'll get to the main points of the program and why we wanted to have this adopted by our commission. And before we get into it, a point to know, we checked with our local counterparts. It's always best to take an existing program and work off of it. We couldn't find one. So we may be one of the few and only agencies in the local area that will be adopting a pest management program. And I'm hoping that our friends and colleagues agencies will follow suit, and we'll be happy to help them with what we found out. What is integrated pest management?
Didn't we have a program before that
we did not have an adopted integrated pest management program. We've had findings in the past of certain actions of what we would do and what we wouldn't do, but this is an overall encompassing program specifically to pest management. We have not had one adopted by the department in the past. Integrated pest management is commonly referred to as IPM. It is a process for treating and controlling pests, and we'll define pests. There's numerous definitions of pests alone. What it does, it uses common sense solutions to problems that you may find in the landscape or in the parks. It anticipates and it prevents pest activity, and specifically infestations. The goal is to prevent things from getting to a point where they're now an infestation in our facilities. What it does, it combines several strategies for long-term solutions. You apply anywhere from biological, cultural, mechanical, physical strategies, and then if none of these really work, then you get into the chemical strategies, and we'll define these and how we interpret them in every aspect of a pest down the road in the program. And it's actually based on the need and effectiveness of what needs to be applied. It's not necessarily on any specific or particular schedule. It is only applied when necessary. The goals for our department to adopt the IPMs is, first and foremost, is to protect human life and the environmental health of our patrons coming and the environment itself from these pests. Obviously, start with inspecting and monitoring our pest population. Our main goal is to minimize the number of chemical applications. And most of the time we may be successful, but there will be times that there will be a necessity to apply certain chemicals to control our pest population. And when we get to that point, the goal is to minimize the quantity and the toxicity of our applications. And yet another goal is to minimize the impacts on non-target areas and non-target animals. This is very key because in the past, as President Kalfayan mentioned, we did adopt one regulation and brought it to council that we no longer use second-generation anticoagulants, and I'll talk about that as we go forth in the program. We want to establish a criteria for using the least toxic chemical materials, and then only use toxic materials if there is a threat to public health and safety, and or to prevent economic and environmental damage. One such example would be as when we get direction from county health to look at the ground squirrel population at Montrose Park. We get letters saying that the population is out of control and we need to be addressing it. That is when we start looking at different types of materials that need to be addressed to control our populations. So what is a pest? A pest can be defined as any organism that interferes or damages the appearance and or health of our parks. And it could impact plants, the turf, the ball fields. It could impact facilities, and as well as our open spaces. Pests, they may impact human and animal health, and that they do transmit diseases, and that could be a nuisance as well. We have broken down to 4 main groups of pests to help with the program here. The first is disease agents and pathogens. These are your typical bacteria, viruses, and fungi that grow around plants, and they do mostly infestations impact plants and vegetation. We have invertebrates, which are your insects, your mites, your bees. Weeds are your undesirable plants. Anywhere a plant doesn't belong, you can consider it to be a weed. And then your vertebrates, your birds, reptiles, rodents, which include gophers, rats, ground squirrels, etc. In our development of the IPM program, we felt it best, and doing research and looking at a lot of writings and studies, we felt it's best approach to put them in 4 separate parts. Set an action threshold, monitor and identify the pest, look at prevention options, and then the control and the treatment. What is setting an action threshold? It is the point where we believe action must be taken. And it actually determines what level of pests will be tolerable, because some levels are acceptable. There's some weeds will be acceptable without having to apply any treatments, and some levels of ants would be acceptable to most folks. But it's determining what is the threshold to determine that it is now necessary to apply some sort of action. It is not intended to eliminate or eradicate the pest, yet just mainly to control it. And then obviously, we want to make sure we control it before they start causing serious problems. We use the economic injury level to determine what is that level. And what is economic injury level is defined as the level of pest infestation when, if it is not treated, it can result in economic, social, environmental, or aesthetic damage. And this is true to, for example, for weeds, as we talked about, certain levels will be tolerable. We don't have to apply anything because there's no real social, economic, aesthetic damage from it. It's just knowing what that fine line is what we have to determine. Monitor and identify the pest. One way to do this, obviously, always checking our fields, our landscape, our ball fields, and our buildings to see if there is any signs of any pests that might be causing any damage. It is very important for us to identify the correct pest. because the treatment to each pest can vary, and each pest could have a different mechanism of adapting to the chemicals that are treated. So it is key to determine the strategy applied to correctly identify it. And of course, the quantity of the pest is also key. For us to be able to identify what the pest is, not know the quantities, we're not going to automatically come in and start applying the treatments. We need to know how much of it there is and if they've actually met the threshold for us to take action. And then conduct staff training. We annually train our staff to apply certain pesticides in our field. Mostly staff is only trained and allowed to apply Roundup in areas where we like the walkways, the cracks, fence lines, or whatnot. Most of the remaining application of pesticides, if any, we have our licensed pesticide applicators as well as our contract pesticide applicators who are licensed by the state to be able to apply in most cases. Prevention. Of course, the most cost-effective way to address a pest population is to prevent it in the first place, not have to deal with them. And in order for us to do that, you can apply a lot of good cultural practices, which we do most of the time within our agency, and we show you pictures of some of our practices. It actually helps reduce the population, reproduction, and dispersal and survival of the pests if we apply some of these cultural practices, which we'll get into in the next few slides. The next slide. So mulching, as you know, every time we do a planter bed and we do any planting, we like to mulch. It controls the weed growth as well as it provides some healthy moisture for the plants desirable. Irrigation management, the less water means less condensation and less moisture in certain areas where pests love to moisture areas because that's where they thrive. Turf management, so the more we aerate our soils, we add amendments, we seed in all the bare areas, it will prevent the weeds from growing into the turf. It'll prevent runoff. For example, restricting food consumption in certain areas, or proper placement of trash cans. If you keep trash cans away from doorways, if pests come in like ants or whatnot, they're not going to find themselves into the building. They're away from doors, they're away from windows. Those are some basic cultural practices that we can apply in help preventing pest populations. And then we get into the control and treatment. So there's a number of categories that these fall under. Biological. Biological control would be the use of living organisms to control other living organisms. Although this is very limited to what we're able to do in the parks. The one example that comes to mind would be, Raul, one example? What would be one example of biological treatment? We're going to come back to it because an example will come to mind. Cultural, we've talked about, is the mulching and irrigation controls, etc. Mechanical and physical. Sometimes we can just basically create barriers for pests not to be able to get into the buildings, or using the hand tools. The physical is using a lot of hand tools for weeds, and it starts getting labor intensive. So tight-fitting trash can lids, which we're now practicing at Lower Shoal, and we're going to be applying it over a brand where the crows come in and they just literally lift the trash bag up to dig in and they make a mess all over, or the coyotes. So the tight-lidding trash cans tend to help with those efforts, and the practice seems to be working down at Lower Shoal and Glen Oaks, and I think we've pushed it on to Riverwalk. We're going to start applying it to other areas as well. And then last but not least, the chemical, which is the use of pesticides. So there are two ways we are looking at controlling. We're always going to try the primary method first. The primary control methods will be the non-chemical approach, which would be your biological, cultural, mechanical, and physical strategies that will apply. And the secondary control would be the chemical applications. And even within the chemical applications, we have actual organic items that we've tried and we will continue to try before going on to the actual chemical materials. Now we're going to break each pest group down and identify what types of controls we're looking at applying. For example, for disease agents, primary controls would be look for disease-resistant plant species. There are some species who are more prone to diseases, would be aphids and bugs or whatnot. Try to not plant those plants in our parks. Next would be appropriate fertilization. Too little or too much fertilization actually is not good for the plant. Too much fertilization can have runoff and can cause environmental concerns, and too little may not be sufficient. So appropriate level of fertilization, the right time to fertilize, all play into our efforts in controlling as a primary control method of disease agent. Picking up dead leaves, flowers, and fruits. If you have a fruit tree in the backyard and your fruits fall underground, you will note that after a few days they're biodegradable, it starts decomposing, and ultimately you start seeing certain bugs and pests start growing out of it. If we are cleaning that stuff more frequently, it prevents the pests from coming or appearing in the first place. Remove diseased plant, either portion of the plant or the entire plant. If it is a diseased plant, those are options for us to consider. And then applying biological controls, like if you have certain types of pests, ladybugs would be one that would eat certain pests. So if you can't complain. We had talked about it. Having ladybugs, difficult to really, in an open environment, controlled environment works better, eat certain types of bugs on the plant. So it's beneficiary to have it, and it controls biologically, naturally, it controls itself, the pest population. Secondary controls for disease agents, we try the natural products. There's some biodegradable oils that we try, baking soda, there's some copper products, there's some sulfur products. And then if those don't do the job, you can go into the traditional fungicides and bactericides to help control disease agents. Invertebrates, insects, mites, there's indoor and outdoor. We have different mechanisms we can approach. For primary control indoors, silicone caulking. If you have cracks in the walls or around the windows, just simply using typical caulking mechanism to just control and close off all the gaps will basically do the job. They won't find a way into the building. Managing the trash, proper storage of food. And if you have a very small population of ants in the building, you can vacuum it. I feel sorry for the working ant, but it's not where they belong. So there's basic primary mechanisms we can approach in trying to control it. Secondary control, you can use some natural products like boric acid or your traditional chemicals like bait. They sell those little baits for roaches and ants. Once they get in and they take the chemical and they take it to the hive and basically kill the hive, that's another way of controlling it. You can always have direct spraying of insecticides, or direct spraying would be the bottles that you find or you buy in the market. You can just literally spray it right on the bug. Or there's applications of insecticides. This would be the larger scale application of insecticide. For outdoor, again, you can practice most of the primary controls as you would on the indoors, and then try to get biological controls, praying mantis, ladybugs, with biological controls, and then use traps. Traps are always a way of trying to keep certain pests away from the areas you don't want them. For example, for bees, I think we put certain traps. Lower shoal is a good example, far away from all the picnic areas, so that it'll attract all the bugs over there and keep the picnic area free of the unwanted insects. Secondary control, again, there's always natural products, canola oil, soaps, orange oil. I think one example is most recently we had aphids in the rose bed outside of City Hall, and I think Raul's application was soap and water. We tried soap and water, and then we did a secondary application. We're still waiting to see what the results are. So the goal is always to try and use the least toxic or non-chemical approaches first to try and address the population. And then, of course, there's always the traditional chemicals in the baits, and then the systemic insecticide, which is an insecticide that you apply in the soil and allow the plant to use its roots to get that chemical material from below the soil grade through the roots, and it actually does the job perfectly fine. And there's always direct spraying of the insecticide, which is your typical contact poison like Raid. And by no means am I endorsing Raid. It's just an example to help get the point across. Weeds. Primary control is mulch, and there's the hand cultivation of bare soils, hand pulling, digging out the weeds. These two are labor intensive. It works well and it does the job in small areas, but when you have a very large area to address, it tends to be very labor intensive, and simply just pulling the weed at times doesn't do the job because they always come back. And then there is use of landscape fabrics. You've probably seen those at landscapes. They put them below the planting grade, and then after they plant, they put mulch on top of it. It does control weed population. It does help in controlling the weed population in our planters. And secondary controls, there's naturally derived products, vinegar solutions, boiling water. We've actually even seen examples of there's a canister of fuel, and you literally light it, and you can burn, literally fire burn the plant, the weeds. They're not as effective because you got to be careful using fire, open flames out in the field. They tend to not work as well. All these solutions we've tried have not been very successful. And then there's always the traditional chemical control, which is the Roundup that you can buy from most markets and Home Depot. And for vertebrates, the primary controls are the use of traps, whether it be glue boards or snap traps. Trash management, again, proper storage of food and seeds. We do have a lot of bags of seeds that we store in some of our yards, the grass seeds, and rats are going to love seeds. So proper storage and securing of those areas will help with the population. And the secondary controls is use of the baits. Typically, these we contract out. We contract with licensed pesticide vendors to control our rodent populations if necessary. So what type of pesticides we use? We only use products that are registered and approved within the state of California. The point we get across to our staff in their training, as well as our licensed applicators, they're the skilled experts, there's strict adherence to the label. Whatever direction the label puts out there, and we recommend any of our residents, if they are going to be applying anything they purchase from the market, read the labels thoroughly and follow through the directions. That will help prevent any unnecessary health issues and concerns with everyone. Only the trained staff will spray Roundup, and then only licensed pesticide applicators and advisors will apply pesticides. We always strive to use the least toxic option that's out there. What we go for is, if you look at any chemical product that you buy out there that has several different signal words, as we call them, we use the one that is caution. Signal word is required by law for every pesticide to have on there, required in the U.S. They must display what level of toxicity they have, and it truly defines what the level of the toxicity of the product. There's 3 signal words. We have danger, which is the highly toxic category 1, we refer to it. It is highly toxic and severely irritating. So these are the things we prevent from use, because we don't want neither our staff nor our public to be coming into contact with any of these toxic chemicals. There is a secondary level, which is the warning. And the signal word warning basically means that it's moderately toxic and moderately irritating. It's not as high level toxicity as category 1. And then the caution one is toxicity categories 3 and 4, which is basic definition leads to they're non-toxic and they're non-irritant. And CSP only uses category 3 and 4 caution label pesticides if we need to apply. Restricted applications. We've given this a lot of thought, and our approach is that we will not do any application near environmental features. For example, streams. Verdugo Park North, there is the old stream that used to flow there. We don't apply pesticides in that area. Rivers, we have Glendale Narrows Riverwalk. Kudos goes to the cleanup crews that come in once a month to help with our weed eradication or trying to control the weed population at Riverwalk. But we made a conscious effort not to apply pesticides over at Riverwalk because of its proximity to the LA River. Water tanks and reservoirs. A lot of our facilities are near or on a water tank or a reservoir. For example, Stangel Field. We cannot apply. If there's any application that needs to happen, it has to be natural products that are applied, including fertilizers. Babe Herman Field, Glorieta Park, the east side of Glorieta Park is on a tank. It's on a reservoir, so that's another area where we have made a conscious effort not to apply any pesticides. And the second generation anticoagulants, which is something 2 or 3 years ago, we went to council and said we were not going to apply. That product, what it is the target pest that you're trying to address, if that pest ingests this product and another wild animal eats it, you could have a secondary effect on the non-target animal. Once we start looking more into it and the concerns came about wildlife being impacted by the pesticides being used or the chemicals, we came to council and said we're no longer going to use second generation anticoagulants. Our intent is to address the target pest and not the non-target animals that are the wildlife that are out there. And this has been in practice for, I don't think we've applied since 2012. We haven't applied any second generation anticoagulants. So licensed contractors, we hire them for termites, gophers, and bees. We have bee removers that we call, and if we have a hive or a nest in certain areas, they'll come and address it, especially for gophers and termites, because those are very specialized treatments necessary. And for termites, we try to approach the target and localized areas versus having to tent everything down. And that's why we hire the contractors, and they know best their skills. And then the IPM program we're developing today, we're going to ask our contractors to apply by it as well. So they will have to abide by the adopted program from Commission today. Other things that are included in the IPM program is notification and record keeping. So prior to application, appropriate signage and notification is our goal to make sure people know that we're applying certain types of pesticides. Maintain records of all pesticide applications. Now, this is a requirement by the County Agriculture Commission that we have to identify where, when, the target pest, the type and quantity, what prevention practices, equipment used, and so on, as well as the level of control and name of applicator. This is required, and we keep track of all of these information. So for the following year, when we apply for our license or permit to be able to apply pesticides, this information and records must meet with the amounts of products, for example, we have purchased. So we keep a very good control on these and have been successfully passing the inspections by County Health and getting our licenses for the following year. Other information we've put in there for the benefit of our staff and anybody that will want information about. We have some emergency contact information, where to call if you have a pesticide spill, emergency treatment facilities, and we've put in a glossary of terms, and although most of those terms are covered in the body of the IPM, there are some terminology that is not, but we wanted to keep it in there in case people have a question and get more familiarized with terms that might be related to pest application. And that, in short, is the program. I'd like to ask if you have any questions. I hope I can answer them. If not, I have Raul here to help me with some of your technical questions.
Go ahead.
Just want to confirm, this doesn't fall into any category of humans, right?
As far as pests? No. Yes. No, it doesn't.
What's the fiscal impact of this policy?
We actually, our entire budget for pesticide application for contractors and materials that we buy is about roughly $15,000, of which half of it we set aside for necessary pest control. And then the other half, the contractors, that would be removers and gophers and termites. And the other half are some of the products that we purchase. Now, that amount does not include mulch and or fertilizers that we buy. We keep that in a separate budget. It's mostly for field renovations where we use the fertilizer and mulch. Most of the time, our mulch is free because we can work with our tree contractors when they have to remove trees or do removals of pruning of trees. We can ask them to bring the mulch for us and for the public to use.
I'm okay.
Okay. Next.
Looking specifically at something like glyphosate, can you give an example of what the regulations you would use and how you would decide to apply a chemical treatment like that?
Yeah.
And where?
We do have, glyphosate is the chemical that is mostly found in the Roundup product. And we do apply Roundup within our parks. And the amounts we use are very limited compared to what may be necessary out there. If, for example, in walkways and cracks that have weeds that are growing out, you can pull the weed as much as you want, but eventually you're not going to get to the bare root of that of the wheat, and it will come back. So those are the areas where we would apply. And also, let's say fence lines for ball fields. You can weed eat all you want within a fence line, but if the turf is growing within the little cracks of a fence in a ball field, that could be thousands of linear feet of fence line. That's an area where we actually apply the Roundup product to kill the roots of that location and be able to get it cleared out. Those are a couple of examples of where we apply.
Mr. Wu?
I do not have any questions, sir.
I actually have. You mentioned food consumption or figuring out a new system of food consumption or where people can actually have food. Is that, do you guys have it outlined, or how would that affect the parks and, barbecues and whatnot people?
Yeah, it is. We covered the control, one of the primary controls as, where food consumption can be. And most of the areas that we have are picnic tables and our barbecues, for example. Those are ideal areas to have them. So in looking at future, for example, indoor activities are ones for us to be able to look at where they could have it and how soon you clean it up, where the trash can should be placed. And, for example, we've been working closely with our counterparts deal with the reservation as soon as they're done to be able to take the trash bags and move them right onto the bins that we have versus leaving them in front of the door or inside, which is what it leads to. But those are practices that we will look at. As of right now, we don't have any areas that need to be restricted. As part of general policy, our picnic areas and picnic benches and tables are far from areas of concern. So where we have them would be ideal areas to have them right now. And going forward, keeping in mind that this policy has been adopted, in looking forward, if new ones are necessary, we'll always keep it in mind and identify areas where it would be best to locate picnic areas and allow food consumption. Now, we can't control every individual coming to a park that might want to have their food or their chips or whatever it might be they're having near or closer to the building areas. That's going to happen. It's very difficult to control, but policy of litter control and trying to keep things away from the building comes into play the next day when we do our maintenance. Make sure we address it as soon as possible, remove it and clear the area, sweep it off, brush it off, pick them up, and to prevent any further infestation. That is the goal.
If I may, I just have one comment and one suggestion. I know that looking at where it spells out IPM program goals is first being to protect human health and the surrounding environment. Can we also maybe incorporate and be sensitive to pets as well? I mean,
Pets?
yeah,
Absolutely.
So see if we could maybe incorporate that. So I know there's a lot of dogs that people do bring to the parks, and I think that we should be sensitive to that as well. So I think having that verbiage in there, I think will assure our citizens and people that use the park that it is pet friendly and pet safe as well. So,
Yes, President Kalfayan, Commissioner Wu, I think that's a good point. We'll incorporate that as part of the language for our goals.
thank you.
One other question. You mentioned programmatic solutions like at Riverwalk or Duke-Magian. If there is a group that wants to take those programmatic goals to parks or other areas, is there a way that staff can convey that outreach and work with a volunteer group if they wanted to adopt an area within a local park?
I think that would be exceptional to have groups that would want to come and help us out with those types of programs. And any group that is interested in adopting a park or an area of a park can contact our office, and we'd be glad to identify the best way to work with them and identify timeframes. And we've had groups that came in and we've worked with them. So we'd be very pleased to have groups come and help us out in that programmatic effort. Absolutely.
Are we in control, or do we have any challenges as far as controlling the pests in our parks at this time?
President Kalfayan, we have done a reasonable job of controlling the pest population where we don't have any serious health issues at the time. When it comes to generally pests, when it comes to weeds, it's an ongoing battle. Weeds, especially with the rains we've experienced this year, you're going to find a lot of weeds in our parks, and our staff is trying to and attempting to make sure that we have a reasonable coverage when it comes to weeds, whether it be removal of the weeds and mulching the planter beds, which is our goal going forth, and or in some cases having to apply pesticide like Roundup to actually kill the weed to its roots and then be able to clean off the area. When it comes to major pests, we do occasionally have an issue. For example, we had a gopher problem at Verdugo and right across the street at Babe Herman. We worked with the school district, kept the kids off of it, and we hired our pesticide applicator contractor to come in and do the necessary application. So our goal continues to be to work with the neighbors, whether it be the schools or the public, on certain things that must be, kept off. For example, gophers require a higher level of toxicity to control. We lock the facility down, address it, and then when it's safe, open the facility back up to the public. Again, the goal continues to be gophers in a park could create hazards because they have holes all over the place, and you have kids playing and running. Anybody twisting an ankle and falling down, injuring themselves is something we cannot take, because safety is our primary concern in our parks. So we have done a pretty good job of keeping those injuries to a minimum and applying mechanisms and methods that we felt were appropriate to be able to address and control the populations of the pests.
Mr. Wu, have a question? No? Yeah.
One more question. Looking at this, I don't know if we are also accounting for mosquitoes, because I know that it's a concern for parents that have young ones, and my son used to play Little League, and I saw all my little ones hanging out the park all day. So I think if something that mosquito is going to be something that we probably want to look into. I don't know if we touch on that through this IPM program.
Yes, Commissioner Wu, mosquitoes fall under the insects category, and one of the ways to control them is not to have standing water. One thing we can do is we talk about irrigation and moisture. We can add something about making sure there's no standing water, because that's where mosquitoes breed. And so we can add that into the program as making sure there's no. Now, as far as spraying for mosquitoes, we do not do that level of control. That will be when certain populations become out of control. We have to contact the county health and let them either address it or give us recommendations. But as far as the biological and or the cultural controls, I think that's something we can add into the mix as a cultural control. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have a question, let's go ahead.
One last comment. I do want to commend staff for putting together this report and having a comprehensive plan and support its goals. I did want to just ask, is there a review period, or can this come back to the Commission on a schedule so that we can continue to review the goals and procedures?
Yes, President Kalfayan, Commissioner Grant, Commissioner Michaels, sorry. We have a Michael Grant. I always get you too confused. Commissioner Michaels, yes, it is. This document is a living document, and within its body, we highlight that it's a living document. For example, if local or state regulations change, we have to adapt and make changes to this document to comply with local and state regulations. So this is a living document. We are going to be practicing this, and if, for example, new cultural, biological, or even chemical options that come about that may be more appropriate to be applied in here, something that our plan is to be able to do that. As far as bringing it back to Commission, we can always bring it back to Commission for additional comments or updates. Let's say we give it a year and come back and let you know how it has been working out in a separate report. And by that time, if Commission has any further recommendations, we'd be happy to incorporate them into the body of the original adoption. Sir?
Okay. I guess now we can have a motion for IPM program.
I'll make the motion to approve with the amendment recommended by Commissioner Wu to include pets.
I'll second.
Mike. Commissioner Fuad, your mic is off.
I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioners Asatrian?
Yes.
Fuad?
Yes.
Michaels?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes.
President Kalfayan?
Yes. Next item, please.
Next, we have item 7, reports information only at ACE Community Center Drop-In Programs Annual Report.
President Kalfayan, members of the Commission, we would like to go forward with the contract class annual report. But in terms of the Community Center Drop-In Program report, it is in your packets. If you have any questions, please let us know. But we'd like to highlight our our contract class annual report.
Good afternoon, President Kalfayan and members of Commission. My name is Eileen Isayan, and I'm here to present the annual report for our contract classes, also known as the Lifelong Learning Program. The program is designed to offer enrichment classes for adults in our community. Most of these classes are held in our facilities and range from 6 to 10 weeks, and prices are ranging from $65 an hour to $150 an hour. For the reporting period, we had 1,415 registrations and brought in a revenue of about $156,000. It was slightly less than last year's due to class cancellations, but that was because of teachers no longer wanting to teach with us. Other than that, the categories range from children's dance, children's visual arts, children's sports, and visual arts for adults. Any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Next, we have item 7C, Therapeutic Recreation Program Annual Report.
Good afternoon, President Kalfayan and members of Commission. My name is Kenneth Kahn. I'm Community Services Supervisor. I supervise Therapeutic Recreation in Maple Park Community Center. I'm just here to give a short introduction about the therapeutic recreation programs that the department offers. Therapeutic recreation is made up of the Club Maple program and the Get Fit program. Both programs service adults with developmental disabilities. The programs are held at Maple Park Community Center and once again service the residents of Glendale and the surrounding areas. The Club Maple program is held on Thursdays from 5:30 to 8 p.m. and Get Fit is held on Mondays from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. So with that, we'll just start a little slideshow that we have put together for you. The Club Maple program has been providing services to the developmentally disabled population of Glendale and its surrounding cities for over 26 years. The type of disabilities include attention deficit disorder, ADD, which we've seen a pretty big increase in over the years, dyslexia, intellectual disability, learning disorders, difficulties noted along a continuum of cognitive abilities, including adaptive, fine motor, perceptual motor, and social and language skills. Learning disabilities, which assumes normal cognitive abilities and refers specifically to problems in reading, arithmetic, and written expression. Therapeutic recreation program provides services to adults with developmental disabilities. All programs are designed to provide recreation, socialization, and educational opportunities. Staff members provide free drop-in activities which are appropriate to age and skill levels in a friendly and safe environment. Once again, the programs, therapeutic recreation programs, consist of the Club Maple and the Get Fit programs. Club Maple meets at Maple Park every Thursday from 5:30 to 8 p.m. Staff members offer a variety of weekly activities, including arts and crafts, games, sports, dances, birthday celebrations, and other social interactive activities. Special events such as a Halloween costume contest, Thanksgiving event, Christmas party, Valentine's Day dance, and many more are held at Maple Park Community Center. This is a slide of our Halloween event that we had, costume contest, and just a fun overall event. This is our annual Christmas party that we have, once again held at Maple Park. Two of our participants for Club Maple. This is our Thanksgiving event. We do provide a full Thanksgiving dinner to all of our participants. Once again, the staff serving the participants. Our Valentine's Day dance at Club Maple. We have had some weddings and marriages come out of this particular event. So, Valentine's Day, once again. Club Maple's annual attendance. The attendance has gone up from the previous year. It's gone up the last several years. I think one of the main reasons is that we are one of the main cities that provides these services to adults with developmental disabilities. Attendance was a weekly 60 participants per week, which basically totals 3,000 per duplicated participants per the year, up from last year's 2,950 and 59 participants for calendar year 2015. The Get Fit program is a program designed to educate adults with developmental disabilities about how to start and maintain a healthy lifestyle through conditioning, exercise, and nutrition. Participants receive a weekly weigh-in, flexibility charting, nutrition tips, and a journal to chart their eating habits and daily exercise. A lot of times one that you'll notice amongst individuals with developmental disabilities, they tend to many of them tend to be out of shape, so this program is really, really important because it helps to kind of, tone that in. Weekly activities begin with stretching, conditioning, and include soccer, basketball, softball, and so forth. Get Fit meets Mondays from 5 to 7 at Maple Park. That's our annual, our weekly basketball night that we do. And once again, Get Fit's attendance has also gone up compared to the previous calendar year. We average about 14 participants per week, and we had 700 participants duplicated for the calendar year, up from the previous year of 2015 from 13 and 650 participants. Questions?
I have a question. You said neighboring cities. Where we get from other neighbors' cities?
Well, most of the residents, most of the participants are from Glendale, but we do get some participants that come in from, Eagle Rock, Atwater Village, and so forth. It's such a popular program. The word just gets out from some of the homes that provide services like Latterman and so forth. Participants come from other cities as well sometimes.
Do we serve full capacity? Do you have any rejects that you cannot take because of the capacity?
No, we've been able to manage it pretty thoroughly. With the staffing, we also get a good amount of volunteers that want to volunteer for the program. A lot of the parents of the participants volunteer, and we get a lot of volunteers that look to, complete service for school and so forth. So we've been able to manage it pretty well.
Good job.
Quick question. How are the programs funded?
The programs for the budget for therapeutic recreation is funded entirely within the general fund.
So the general fund is being that's through the city of Glendale?
Correct.
But it's open to non-residents as well?
It's open to non-residents as well as of now, yes. But most of the participants are Glendale residents, but we get some that are, outside from surrounding cities. It's just because it's such a, it's a tight-knit community. Once parents get to know each other, my kid has a disability, I live in Eagle Rock, I live in Glendale, so sometimes, obviously those bonds are built and so forth, so.
Maybe it's okay to continue this way till we get to full capacity that we're rejecting patients from the Glendale.
Yeah, we don't reject anybody, but yeah, it's definitely something, if we want to make it, a preference for Glendale residents, it's something we can definitely look at down the line. But, as of now, we do have the capability to service pretty much, all of the above.
All right. Thank you.
Can you walk us through your outreach? How do you find the partnerships, and how do you?
Sure. Well, most of the advertising that we do for our programs, besides being on the city webpage and so forth, some of the stuff that we do internally, we also send out a mailer through a mailing list that we have. That also goes to all of the group homes that service, because a lot of these individuals don't live at home. They actually live at some of these special care facilities. So we contact them. We're in touch with them, and they give us a lot of referrals. We do get a lot of word of mouth, a lot of caregivers that, look us up and vice versa.
Is there a program specifically for community-based organizations?
Well, we're open to that. We deal with a lot of other community-based organizations that look, such as Latterman House, which, looks to basically find supplemental activities for their participants to do. A lot of these group homes and so forth, so.
How diverse is the?
How diverse is it? It's a pretty diverse group of people. You get all walks of life within that program. So, a lot of the participants that come to the Club Maple program, they've been coming for years. Like I said, the program's been around for over 26 years, and it's just continued to build over the years. So,
do you have participants that have language barriers?
We have some, but we do have staff that are able to assist in those areas as well. So.
Thank you.
No problem.
Do you have any question?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next, we have 7D, Section Activity Reports at 1, Human Services.
President Kofine, members of the Commission, the three reports, Human Services, Recreation and Community Services, and Park Services, reports are in your packet, but due to time, if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer your questions, but basically the reports are in your packet. And like mentioned earlier, I would like to remind the Commission that we do have the Cesar Chavez event coming up this coming Saturday, our One Glendale Championships the following Saturday, and on April 15th we have the Spring Extravaganza. So hopefully we'll see all of you out there enjoying the festivities.
Any more items?
Unless there are any questions, we can adjourn the meeting.
Go ahead, please.
When will we get the report for the summer series that's coming up? Who's coordinating that from the staff?
The summer concert series?
Yeah, or just general the summer events and I guess concert.
Yeah, we'll have something next month in April.
Thank you.
Staff's currently working on the summer wrap-up.
Any questions? Just go out and vote on April 4th. This meeting is adjourned.